The room buzzed with excitement as the glittering crowd at the charity gala exchanged pleasantries. Hollywood stars, powerful business moguls, and philanthropists mingled beneath the shimmering chandeliers. The event was lavish, a true display of wealth and influence. But amid all the glitter and glamour, one man stood apart: Keanu Reeves. Keanu, as humble as ever, sat quietly at a corner table, a soft smile on his face as he chatted with a few close friends. Dressed in a simple black suit, he was a picture of understated elegance. His presence, although unassuming, commanded respect, his reputation not for his fame but for his character. He was the kind of person who lived quietly in the shadows, away from the tabloids, even though his name was known across the world. The evening took a sudden, unexpected turn when Jonathan Foster, a billionaire tech mogul known for his arrogance and sharp tongue, entered the room. He was the complete opposite of Keanu in every sense. Dressed in a tailor-made suit and sporting an air of superiority, Jonathan made his way through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries, his loud voice echoing through the room. But when he spotted Keanu sitting in the corner, something inside him seemed to snap. "Oh, look who it is," Jonathan said, his voice carrying. He wasn't speaking to anyone in particular, but the people around him turned their attention. Keanu Reeves, the guy who peaked in the 90s. The once famous actor who can't even land a decent role anymore. "How's it feel, Keanu? I bet it's tough watching the rest of Hollywood move on while you're stuck in the past." The crowd went quiet. Keanu looked up, his face a calm mask of composure. His eyes met Jonathan's, and for a brief moment, there was silence, like the calm before a storm. The room waited for Keanu to respond, but he didn't. He simply smiled softly, giving Jonathan a polite nod as if he hadn't heard the cruel words. Jonathan wasn't done. Sensing the attention on him, he pressed on. "You know," he continued with a grin, "I hear you're still living in that tiny house, driving your old car. A man like you could have had it all. What happened, Keanu? Did fame not suit you? Or maybe you're just too old for it now?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some looked at Keanu, expecting him to retaliate. Others seemed to enjoy the drama unfolding. Jonathan's words weren't just mocking. They were designed to humiliate. And yet, Keanu remained silent, his expression unchanged. "Isn't it funny?" Jonathan went on, his smirk widening. "How someone can have everything, fame, fortune, talent, and still end up as irrelevant as a faded movie poster." Keanu finally spoke, his voice calm and steady. "Jonathan, I'm not interested in the game you're playing." His words were measured, not angry, but something about the way he said it made the room feel colder. The challenge was clear, but no one expected what would come next. Jonathan chuckled, thinking Keanu's response was merely a sign of weakness. "Well, that's a shame," he said, turning to leave. "I guess some people just don't know how to fight back." But as Jonathan walked away, the wheels of fate had already begun to turn. Keanu's lack of response was puzzling. Was he defeated? Was he too proud to acknowledge Jonathan's jabs? Or was there something else? The audience, still buzzing with whispers, couldn't help but wonder, what happens when the most humble man in Hollywood is pushed too far? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As Keanu sat back down, a quiet resolve settled over him. He hadn't responded to Jonathan's taunts, but something inside him was stirring. The world would soon find out that Keanu Reeves wasn't a man to be underestimated. The stage was set. And what came next would leave everyone speechless. The aftermath of that night lingered in the air like the final notes of a symphony. The charity gala had been just another high society event to the world, but for Keanu Reeves, it had marked the beginning of something far more complicated. The next morning, the tabloids were already buzzing with headlines. Keanu Reeves, the has-been of Hollywood, and tech mogul Jonathan Foster roasts the fallen star. Jonathan's mocking remarks had been caught on camera and were circulating everywhere, on social media, television interviews, and celebrity gossip columns. The world had quickly turned their attention to the supposed rift between the two men. And Jonathan, he was eating it all up. He appeared on every talk show he could, laughing off the incident like it was no big deal. "Keanu's a nice guy," he'd say, shrugging, "but let's be real, he's a relic of the past. I'm just stating the obvious." He would laugh, making light of the entire situation, each joke digging a deeper hole for Keanu, and the media had a field day. The constant barrage of ridicule took its toll. Keanu's fans were divided. Some rallied behind him, praising his restraint, while others felt frustration building. They wondered why Keanu wasn't doing more to defend himself. Why wasn't he standing up to Jonathan, fighting back against the ridicule that had turned him into a punchline? Keanu, however, remained silent. His publicist released a statement saying Keanu had no interest in engaging in petty drama. Still, every day more jabs came his way, each one sharper than the last. One tabloid even mocked his looks, calling him the man who doesn't age, but maybe that's the problem. Another claimed his acting career was on life support, with no one willing to give him the final push to retire. Jonathan's snide remarks began to spread like wildfire, infecting every corner of the public conversation. Keanu could feel the pressure building. He wasn't immune to it. Despite his calm, he had feelings, and the constant humiliation was gnawing at him. His friends and colleagues noticed it too. "I don't get it, man," said his best friend and longtime collaborator, Alex, as they sat in Keanu's cozy Los Angeles home one afternoon. "Why don't you just give him a taste of his own medicine? You know, go on a talk show and turn the tables on him." Keanu, as always, kept his cool. His fingers traced the rim of his coffee mug as he thought for a moment. "It's not worth it, Alex. You don't win by playing their game." But there was something in his voice, a quiet determination, a hint that he wasn't quite as passive as he seemed. Keanu's ability to remain stoic was legendary, but even the calmest of oceans could hide a storm beneath the surface. What the world didn't know was that Keanu wasn't just going to take the insults lying down. His response would come, but it wouldn't be in the way anyone expected. And then, one day, it happened. Keanu made a move that no one saw coming. Keanu had always been more than just a talented actor. What the public didn't know was that over the years, Keanu had taken a keen interest in business. He had invested in a variety of ventures, none of them flashy, none of them for the public's eye. But he had a sharp mind, a good sense for opportunity, and a low profile. While the world fixated on his acting career, Keanu had been quietly building his empire. It was during a particularly harsh interview, where Jonathan again belittled him in front of millions of viewers, that Keanu made his move. The host had asked Jonathan in a sarcastic tone how he felt about the failure that was Keanu Reeves. Jonathan had laughed loudly, dismissing the question with a snide remark about how Keanu would never be a contender again. That was when Keanu finally stepped in. He released a press statement that afternoon. "I'd like to share something with you all. For the past few years, I've been quietly investing in a tech company called Nexus Tech, which just so happens to be one of the companies Jonathan Foster currently leads." The announcement hit like a thunderclap. Nexus Tech was a rising tech startup that had been steadily growing, gaining influence in Silicon Valley. Jonathan Foster, in all his brash confidence, had never suspected that Keanu was involved. But now, the truth was out. Keanu wasn't just an actor, he was a savvy businessman with his hand in the game. "Interesting," Jonathan said in a response, trying to stay calm, but his voice betrayed him. "Keanu thinks he can just waltz in and take over. Good luck with that. No one in tech cares about some washed-up movie star." But Keanu wasn't interested in competing on Jonathan's terms. He had something much more strategic planned. The next day, Keanu attended a Nexus Tech board meeting, his first appearance at the company since the news broke. While Jonathan sat at the head of the table, seething with indignation, Keanu walked in with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The tension in the room was palpable. Jonathan tried to dismiss Keanu with a sneer, but it was clear Keanu had been quietly positioning himself. He didn't need to boast or flaunt anything. His actions spoke louder than any words could. Keanu wasn't trying to play Jonathan's game. He was playing his own. The world watched in awe as Keanu's involvement in Nexus Tech grew, and with each passing day, Jonathan became more and more agitated. Keanu was no longer the target of ridicule. He was now a force to be reckoned With everyone had expected Keanu to simply bow down to Jonathan's wealth and power. No one expected Keanu to flip the script, and so the rising conflict continued. Jonathan's mockery had sparked something in Keanu, a quiet storm that was now brewing, and the world would soon see that there was more to Keanu Reeves than anyone had ever realized. The game had only just begun. The media couldn't get enough of it. The world was stunned. Keanu Reeves, the beloved actor known for his humble nature and humble beginnings, was now making headlines for something entirely different. His quiet, mysterious move to invest in Jonathan Foster's tech company, Nexus Tech, had thrown everyone off balance. The public was baffled. How could Keanu, of all people, be involved in the cutthroat world of business? But while the media scrambled to make sense of it, those close to Keanu noticed a subtle shift in him. It was like he was playing a new game, one with rules no one else understood. Friends, family, and colleagues saw the usually composed Keanu start to change. His eyes, usually soft and untroubled, now seemed sharper. His smile, while still warm, carried an edge that suggested a new sense of purpose. Alex, his best friend and confidant, sat with Keanu one evening in his minimalist home. The two had shared countless late-night talks over the years, but tonight felt different. Alex leaned forward, concern creasing his brow. "You've been different lately," Alex said, his voice quieter than usual. "I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's like something's brewing inside you. Are you really planning to take down Jonathan? You know, that's a dangerous game." Keanu looked up from his coffee cup, his face unreadable. For a moment there was a silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Then he spoke, his voice calm, but filled with a quiet determination. "I'm not trying to take him down, Alex. I'm just doing what I know is right." Keanu paused, as if weighing his next words carefully. "Jonathan's been playing a game of dominance and power, using people like chess pieces. But what happens when the game stops being about power and starts being about something deeper? What happens when it's about integrity? About showing the world that you don't have to sink to their level to win?" Alex blinked, surprised by the intensity in Keanu's tone. He'd always known Keanu as someone who avoided conflict, someone who preferred peace over drama. But now, he saw something else, something steely, something that suggested Keanu was preparing for a battle, but not the kind of battle anyone expected. "Keanu, this is dangerous," Alex said, his voice tinged with worry. "Jonathan is ruthless. If you start making moves in his world, you could get hurt. You know that, right?" Keanu met Alex's eyes. "I've been hurt before," he said simply. "But this isn't about revenge. It's about something bigger than both of us." Keanu's words hung in the air like a challenge. It wasn't just about standing up for himself anymore. It was about proving a point to the world, that kindness, integrity, and humility could be weapons just as powerful as wealth and influence. But would it be enough? Or would Jonathan's wealth and resources crush him before he even got the chance to show his hand? The next morning, Keanu's actions spoke louder than words ever could. He arrived at the next Nexus Tech board meeting, Hurley quietly observing as Jonathan paced in front of the boardroom window, clearly on edge. Jonathan had never been comfortable with surprises, and Keanu had just delivered a big one. Jonathan didn't acknowledge him at first, trying to act as though Keanu wasn't there. But the tension in the room was palpable. Keanu remained seated, calm and collected, his mind already working, his plan unfolding. As the meeting began, Keanu remained silent for the first part of the discussion, listening to Jonathan and the other board members talk about company expansion plans, new products and financial forecasts. Jonathan seemed increasingly uneasy, as Keanu's presence weighed heavily on him. After all, Keanu wasn't just a passive investor anymore. He had been studying the company, its leadership, and its financials in meticulous detail. Finally, the moment came. Jonathan made a proposal that Keanu found troubling, a plan that could harm the environment and lead to layoffs of hundreds of workers. The proposal was aimed at increasing profits, but it came at the expense of ethics. Keanu could feel his frustration building. He had always believed in doing the right thing, even when it was hard. And this wasn't right. Without warning, Keanu spoke up. "I have some concerns about the direction we're headed," he said, his voice cutting through the room with surprising authority. This proposal could lead to long-term damage to both our workers and the environment. It's not sustainable, it's not ethical. The room fell silent. Jonathan looked up, his face tight with disbelief. This wasn't how he'd expected things to go. Keanu was supposed to sit quietly in the background, a silent investor, a token name on the roster. But Keanu had a plan, one that didn't involve just throwing money around to make things go his way. No, Keanu was playing a different game. "I'd like to propose an alternative approach," Keanu continued, his voice steady. "One that focuses on sustainability, employee well-being, and long-term growth, not just short-term profits." Jonathan's jaw clenched. He didn't like being challenged in front of his own team, especially not by someone who wasn't supposed to be involved in the company's operations. "Keanu, you're an actor, not a businessman," Jonathan shot back, trying to belittle him, but there was an underlying edge to his voice. "This is the real world. Stick to movies. Let the grown-ups handle the company." But Keanu's response was measured. "I'm not asking you to listen because I'm Keanu Reeves. I'm asking you to listen because what I'm saying makes sense." The tension in the room was electric. The board members exchanged nervous glances. Jonathan tried to regain control, but he was losing it. His position as the unquestioned leader was being challenged in a way he wasn't prepared for. Keanu, still calm, leaned forward slightly, making eye contact with Jonathan. "If you want to play the game of power, Jonathan, that's your choice, but I'm playing for something bigger. You may not realize it now, but I'm here to make a change, not just for myself, but for everyone." Jonathan's face twisted with anger, but Keanu didn't flinch. For the first time, Keanu was stepping into the light, not as a passive observer, but as a force to be reckoned with. It was no longer about Hollywood versus Silicon Valley, fame versus fortune, or actor versus mogul. This was about something far deeper, about integrity, ethics, and fighting for what was right. As the meeting drew to a close, Jonathan left in a storm of frustration, but Keanu remained behind, quietly discussing the alternative proposal with the board. It was a small victory, but it was enough to send a clear message. Keanu was no longer just a man with a reputation. He was a man with a purpose. And that purpose was about to change everything. The world was watching, and Keanu's journey was just beginning. The weeks following Keanu's confrontation with Jonathan Foster at the Nexus Tech board meeting passed in a blur. The media coverage was relentless, with pundits and critics alike dissecting every word, every move, every action. What had started as a small shift in the world of business had now blossomed into an all-out spectacle. The underdog was rising, and the public was captivated. Keanu's alternative proposal had struck a nerve, not only with the board members of Nexus Tech, but also with the wider public. While Jonathan and his supporters scrambled to downplay the impact, Keanu's vision was being embraced by workers, environmental activists, and even those who had once ridiculed him. His message was simple, yet profound. Integrity and long-term growth mattered more than immediate profit at any cost. But Keanu's journey wasn't just about a company. It was becoming clear that this battle was not just between two men. It was about something bigger. It was a fight for the values Keanu held dear, values that he had long carried quietly in the background, away from the public eye. Values of kindness, empathy, and doing the right thing, even when it wasn't the popular choice. And now the game had changed. Keanu knew that going up against someone like Jonathan Foster wasn't going to be easy. Jonathan had the power, the wealth, and the connections. But Keanu had something far more important: people on his side, people who believed in him, in his mission, in his fight. Slowly, he began to build a movement around his cause, gathering support from unexpected places. In the weeks that followed, Keanu began appearing at rallies, speaking to small crowds of passionate people who had been inspired by his courage. He didn't speak like a politician or a businessman trying to win a battle. He spoke from the heart. "I'm not here to tell you what you should do," Keanu would say at the rallies. "I'm here because I believe in something. And I believe that when we come together, we can make a difference. We don't have to sacrifice our values for success. Success can mean something better. The more Keanu spoke, the more people listened. His movement, which he never intended to create, began to take shape. It was as if the world was waiting for someone like him to stand up and show them a new way. Meanwhile, Jonathan's arrogance had not dimmed. If anything, it had grown more pronounced. He began publicly attacking Keanu more aggressively, calling him naive and out of touch with reality. Keanu doesn't understand business, Jonathan would say. He thinks kindness can save the world, but the world doesn't work like that. But with each attack, Keanu's resolve grew stronger. He wasn't just defending himself anymore. He was fighting for something greater than a single company or a single individual. He was fighting for the future. And then, just as the conflict between the two men began to escalate, an unexpected twist came from within Nexus Tech itself. One evening, Keanu received an anonymous message. It was a cryptic text, simple yet loaded with meaning. "They're going to take him down from within." Keanu's heart raced as he read the message over and over. He had been under the impression that his fight was against Jonathan and the corporate system, but now it seemed there was more going on beneath the surface. Someone inside Nexus Tech was planning to sabotage Jonathan's position, using Keanu's growing influence as a distraction. Keanu felt the weight of the situation settling over him. The stakes had just been raised. The next day, Keanu was invited to a clandestine meeting at a secluded restaurant in downtown Los Angeles. He arrived, unsure of what to expect, but when he entered the dimly lit room, he was met by a figure he had never expected to see. Sarah Montgomery. Hey, senior executive at Nexus Tech. Sarah had been one of the board members who had supported Keanu's alternative proposal, and Keanu had admired her quiet strength from the start. But now, standing before him, she looked different, nervous, guarded. "Keanu," she said, her voice low, "I have information that could change everything." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "What kind of information?" Sarah leaned in, her eyes darting around as if ensuring they weren't being watched. "There's a faction within the company, high-level executives, who are planning to use you as a pawn. They want to push Jonathan out and take control, and they think they can do it with your support." Keanu's heart sank. "You're telling me they want to manipulate me into taking down Jonathan?" Sarah nodded, her face tense. "They see you as a tool. They think if they get you on their side, the media will support them, and they can take the company for themselves. But I don't want that. I'm telling you this because you need to know you're being played." Keanu processed her words in silence, the weight of the revelation sinking in. This wasn't just about Jonathan anymore. It wasn't even about business. It was about power, pure, unrelenting power. "I can't let that happen," Keanu said, quietly. "I can't be part of that game." Sarah's face softened. "Then we have to stop it, together." Keanu knew what he had to do. It was no longer enough to fight Jonathan or the corporate structure alone. Now he was up against an even more dangerous force, those who would manipulate everything for their own gain, with no regard for ethics, people, or the future. This wasn't just about business. This was about the heart and soul of what Keanu believed in. The clock was ticking. Keanu had to make a decision, stand by his values and expose the truth, or play the game and risk losing himself in the process. He looked up at Sarah, the fire of resolve igniting in his eyes. "Let's stop them. Let's take this all the way." And so, with allies in places he never imagined, Keanu's journey was about to take an even darker, more dangerous turn. What had started as a battle with one man had become a battle for the soul of a company, and possibly for the future of the tech world itself. The stakes were higher than ever. And this time there was no turning back. The weight of the decision settled heavily on Keanu's shoulders. As he and Sarah began to strategize, the pieces of the puzzle started to come together, each discovery more chilling than the last. Nexus Tech, under the slick surface of its innovation and success, was a breeding ground for manipulation and betrayal. The once visionary company that had promised to change the world was now being controlled by those who only cared about their own power and wealth. Keanu felt the familiar sting of frustration growing within him. He'd always believed that business could be a force for good, a way to improve lives, to create something lasting. But what he was uncovering was nothing short of an emotional betrayal. These were not just corporate players. These were people who had no remorse about tearing down everything just for personal gain. Every conversation he had with Sarah, every moment spent investigating, the truth hit harder. Keanu couldn't believe that Nexus Tech, the very company he had once believed in, was riddled with corruption. Yet the deeper he dug, the clearer it became. And with every revelation, Keanu grew more determined. This wasn't just about taking down Jonathan anymore. This was about protecting the people who had invested in the company, the employees who believed in the dream, and the thousands of families who relied on the stability Nexus Tech had once offered. Keanu wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for justice. But it wasn't just the company's betrayal that stung. The emotional toll was far deeper. The more he became involved, the more he felt the distance between himself and his past. The quiet, peaceful life he once cherished seemed like a distant memory slipping further away. His friendship with Alex, which had always been a comforting constant, was now strained. Alex had been worried from the start about Keanu's new path, and he wasn't wrong to be concerned. One evening, after a long day of meetings and strategy sessions, Keanu sat with Alex in the same familiar cafe where they'd spent countless hours together in the past. Alex leaned across the table, eyes filled with a mix of worry and frustration. "You're changing, Keanu," Alex said, his voice quiet but full of emotion. "This fight, it's consuming you. I don't recognize you anymore." Keanu looked down, unable to meet his friend's gaze. The truth stung more than he'd realized. "I'm still the same, Alex. He paused, looking for the right words. "I don't know how else to do this. I can't just walk away. I can't ignore what's happening. This is bigger than me now." Alex shook his head, disbelief flashing in his eyes. "But at what cost? You're not the same person who believed in peace and kindness. You're becoming part of a war you can't win. You're losing yourself." The words hit Keanu hard. He had always prided himself on his ability to stay grounded, to remain true to his values. But now, with the weight of his mission pushing him further into the chaos, he could feel a part of him slipping away. "I don't know if I'm losing myself," Keanu whispered. "But I can't stand by and let everything I've worked for crumble. I have to do something, Alex, for the people who are caught in the middle of all this, for the ones who don't have a voice." Alex stared at him, his face filled with conflicted emotions. "You're fighting for something, but you're also fighting against the very thing that made you who you are. Is this worth it?" Keanu's eyes flickered with uncertainty. Was it worth it? He didn't have an answer, not yet. But the deeper he was drawn into this battle, the more he realized it was not just about saving a company or defeating Jonathan. It was about something far more complex, finding the balance between his integrity and the harsh reality of the world around him. Suddenly, his phone buzzed on the table, breaking the heavy silence. It was a message from Sarah marked as urgent. Keanu's heart skipped a beat as he opened the text. "We've uncovered something big. It's worse than we thought. Meet me tonight. You need to see this." Keanu's blood ran cold. The moment had arrived. The moment that would change everything. He glanced at Alex, whose face had softened, a silent understanding between them. "Go," Alex said quietly. "But don't lose yourself in this, please." Keanu nodded, the weight of Alex's words pressing heavily on his chest. As he stood up, he felt the uncertainty of the situation, the emotional turmoil crashing over him. Could he really keep his integrity intact in this war, or was he already too far gone? Later that night, Keanu met Sarah at a nondescript building in a part of Los Angeles he didn't recognize. They entered quietly, moving through a labyrinth of hallways until they reached a small office where Sarah was already waiting. Her face was pale, and there was a nervous energy about her. "This is it," she said, handing Keanu a folder that seemed far too heavy for its size. "What's inside will change everything." Keanu opened the folder, scanning through the documents and images. His mind raced as he processed the information. Damning evidence, internal emails, secret financial transactions. The depths of the conspiracy went even further than he'd imagined. Jonathan was not only manipulating his own board members, he was involved in illegal activity, using Nexus Tech's resources to fund a secret, shadowy network of companies that had ties to global corruption. The extent of the web he had woven was staggering. Jonathan wasn't just a businessman with questionable ethics. He was a criminal mastermind, operating in the shadows. Keanu's heart pounded in his chest as he absorbed the gravity of the situation. The fight had just escalated to an unimaginable level. "We have to expose this," Keanu said, his voice shaky with emotion. "We have to make sure the truth comes out." Sarah nodded, her eyes reflecting the same determination. "But we have to be careful. Jonathan won't go down without a fight." Keanu clenched his fists, his mind racing. This wasn't just about exposing a corrupt CEO anymore. This was about uncovering a global network of corruption that could have far-reaching consequences for thousands, if not millions, of lives. The emotional weight of it all hit Keanu like a freight train. His journey had begun as a fight for integrity, but now it had become a battle to expose a hidden world of deception, one that stretched far beyond anything he could have anticipated. As the enormity of what lay ahead hit him, Keanu knew there was no turning back. The stakes were higher than ever, and with each passing moment, the tension grew. Keanu was no longer just fighting for his beliefs. He was fighting for the truth, the emotional climax of this journey had arrived. Keanu would have to face not only the dangers that came with exposing the truth, but also the battle within himself, his own doubts, fears, and the price he was willing to pay for what he believed in. And the truth would come at a cost. The game had changed. The weeks that followed were the most dangerous and intense of Keanu's life. What had once been a battle for control of Nexus Tech had now morphed into an all-out war. The truth about Jonathan's illegal operations had been leaked to the media, and the world was watching. Keanu's world, once filled with quiet reflection and humble projects, was now thrust into the chaotic swirl of global news cycles. The idea revelations had shaken the corporate world to its core. Executives from multiple companies had been implicated, global markets were rattled, and the media couldn't get enough of the scandal. For the first time in his life, Keanu found himself thrust into the spotlight in ways he'd never imagined. The quiet, introspective man who once avoided the camera now had cameras and reporters trailing his every move, waiting for his next statement, his next move. But Keanu had never been in this for fame. He was in it to expose the truth, to bring justice to those who had been harmed by Jonathan's unscrupulous actions, and to ensure that this kind of corruption could no longer thrive unchecked. Sarah was by his side through it all. Together, they worked tirelessly to ensure that the evidence they had uncovered was made public, and that the individuals behind the corruption were held accountable. Despite the mounting pressure, Keanu never wavered. His commitment to the cause remained unwavering. It wasn't about taking down a billionaire. It was about righting the wrongs of a broken system. But even with the adrenaline and the constant urgency of the battle, there were moments of reflection. In the quiet hours, when the noise of the outside world seemed to fade, Keanu allowed himself a brief respite. He thought about everything he had sacrificed to get here, the friendships, the moments of peace, the simplicity of his life before all this had begun. He thought about Alex, his oldest and closest friend. Their relationship had been strained throughout this journey, and the last conversation they had left a lingering ache in Keanu's heart. Alex had been right to worry. Keanu had changed, and part of him wasn't sure who he was anymore. One afternoon, as the weight of the world pressed down on him, Keanu found himself back at the cafe where he and Alex used to meet. The table they always sat at was empty, but Keanu still felt an undeniable connection to that space, the place where his journey had started, the place where his ideals had once felt so clear and simple. As he sat there, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Alex. "I'm proud of you, Keanu. Even if I don't always agree with the path you've chosen, I know you're doing what you believe in. Just don't lose yourself along the way. You're still my friend, no matter what." Keanu stared at the screen, feeling a rush of emotions flood over him. It was as if Alex had sent him exactly what he needed to hear at the moment he needed to hear it most. He hadn't lost everything, he hadn't lost himself. And maybe, just maybe, he hadn't lost the chance to rebuild the relationships that mattered most. He quickly typed a reply. "Thanks, Alex, you're right. I'm still figuring it all out. But I won't give up on who I am." It was a small gesture, but in that moment, it felt like the first step toward healing. In the weeks that followed, the legal battles raged on. Jonathan was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. His empire crumbled, and those who had been complicit in his actions were forced to answer for their crimes. But the victory, though monumental, was bittersweet. Keanu's focus had never been on vengeance. It had been about exposing the truth and fighting for what was right. And now that the battle had been won, there was still much to do. There were people who had been hurt by the corruption at Nexus Tech, people who had lost their jobs or their savings because of the unethical actions that had taken place under Jonathan's leadership. Keanu knew that the work wasn't over. This was just the beginning of a new chapter. Keanu took on a new role within Nexus Tech, working to rebuild the company from the ground up. The company would no longer be driven solely by profits, but by a commitment to transparency, sustainability, and ethical business practices. It would take time, but Keanu was determined to restore the integrity of the company he had once believed in. In the process of rebuilding Nexus Tech, Keanu learned something important, not just about business, but about himself. He realized that the fight for justice didn't end with exposing the truth. It was a continuous journey. It was about finding balance and staying true to his values, no matter how hard the road ahead seemed. And it wasn't just about business. It was about people, the employees, the communities, the families whose lives had been impacted by the greed and corruption of powerful individuals. Keanu made it his mission to listen to them, to understand their struggles, and to ensure that no one else would have to suffer in the same way again. He also rebuilt his relationship with Alex. It wasn't easy, and it took time, but slowly they began to find common ground once again. Alex may not have agreed with every decision Keanu made, but he respected the man Keanu had become, and that meant everything. As Keanu stood in front of the newly restructured Nexus Tech, the sun setting behind him, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here, the struggle, the sacrifices, the personal toll. Everything had led him to this point, and as much as he had lost along the way, he had also gained something invaluable. He had found his voice. "I may not have all the answers," Keanu said to the small group of employees gathered around him. "But I know this. Together, we can make something better. We don't have to sacrifice our integrity to succeed. We can change the world, one step at a time." The employees cheered, and for the first time in a long while, Keanu felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had faced the darkest of times, but now he stood on the edge of something new, something hopeful. And as he looked ahead, he knew that whatever came next, he would face it with the same unwavering commitment to the truth and to the people who believed in him. The battle was over, but the real work had just begun. And as the final rays of sunlight faded into the horizon, Keanu knew he had done the right thing. He had fought not just for a company or a cause, but for the future, a future built on integrity, hope, and the belief that change was possible. It was a new beginning. Keanu stood at the edge of a new chapter in his life. The battle against Jonathan. And the corruption at Nexus Tech had taken its toll, but it had also sparked something in him, something deeper than just a desire for victory. It had ignited a passion to rebuild, not just companies or careers, but lives. He had seen firsthand the devastation that unchecked greed could wreak, and he had vowed to ensure that it never happened again. As he settled into his new role at Nexus Tech, Keanu faced challenges that would test not just his skills as a businessman, but also his resolve. The company had been left in shambles after the scandal. Trust had been shattered, employees were scared, and the future of the organization was uncertain. The road ahead was filled with obstacles, and it would take more than just legal victories to restore the company to its former glory. Keanu knew that rebuilding trust would be the hardest part. He had learned that business wasn't just about making deals or earning money. It was about people, their hopes, dreams, and livelihoods. The employees of Nexus Tech had been betrayed, and Keanu was determined to show them that he was not just another CEO trying to salvage his own reputation. He was committed to doing what was right, even if it meant making difficult decisions along the way. The first step was transparency. Keanu made it a priority to hold town hall meetings with the employees, where he listened to their concerns and shared his vision for the company's future. It was a process that took time, but slowly the workers began to see that Keanu wasn't just using them as pawns in a corporate game. He truly cared about their well-being and their success, but the road wasn't always smooth. There were moments of doubt, times when Keanu questioned whether he was making the right decisions. The pressure was overwhelming, and there were those who were still loyal to Jonathan, the former CEO, and they were determined to resist the changes Keanu was trying to implement. One day, after a particularly tense meeting with a group of disgruntled employees, Keanu found himself sitting alone in his office, staring out the window. The weight of his responsibilities felt heavier than ever. He had always believed in the idea that one person could make a difference, but now, as he looked at the mountain of work ahead, he wondered if he was up to the task. Just as he was about to lose himself in the self-doubt that had been creeping up on him, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. "I know things are tough right now, but I want you to remember why you started this. You're making a difference, Keanu. The future is still in your hands." Keanu smiled, reading her words. Sarah had been his rock throughout this entire journey, and her unwavering belief in him was just the motivation he needed. He knew that. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but with people like Sarah by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next. That night, Keanu sat down with a notepad and began to write out his thoughts. He realized that this was more than just about business. This was about leadership, the kind of leadership that inspired others to believe in something bigger than themselves. He thought about the lessons he had learned during his fight against Jonathan and the corruption within Nexus Tech. First, he had learned that power could be dangerous. Absolute power could corrupt absolutely, and it was essential to stay grounded and true to one's values, even when surrounded by temptation. But power wasn't just something that could corrupt. It was also something that could inspire. Keanu had seen firsthand how one person's determination could spark a movement and bring about change. Second, he had learned that success wasn't just about profits. It was about making a difference in the lives of others. Keanu had once been caught up in the idea of business as a means to an end, but now he saw it as a way to impact the world positively. Money could be made, but the true legacy was in the lives touched along the way. Finally, Keanu had learned that trust was everything. He had learned the hard way that trust, once broken, was incredibly difficult to rebuild. But it wasn't impossible. Through his actions, his transparency, and his willingness to listen, Keanu had begun to rebuild the shattered trust within Nexus Tech. It wasn't going to happen overnight, but with each small victory, the company was beginning to heal. As Keanu finished writing down his thoughts, he realized that while the future was uncertain, it was also full of possibilities. The mistakes of the past couldn't be erased, but they could be used as stepping stones to create something better. The next day, he walked into the office with a renewed sense of purpose. He called for another town hall meeting, but this time, he had a different message for the employees. He didn't just want to hear their concerns, he wanted to share his vision for the future. "I know it's been a tough road," Keanu began, standing in front of the room of employees. "And I know I'm asking a lot of you, but I'm not asking you to follow me because I'm the CEO. I'm asking you to join me in creating something new, something that can't be built on the foundation of lies and corruption. I'm asking you to help me create a company that puts people first." The room was quiet as Keanu's words hung in the air. For a moment it seemed as though nothing would change. But then slowly, one by one, the employees began to nod. Some even clapped. It wasn't a raucous applause, but it was a start. They were listening, and that was all Keanu needed. As the meeting ended and the employees slowly filtered out of the room, Keanu felt a sense of relief wash over him. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a step in the right direction. Later that evening, Sarah called him to check in. "How did it go?" she asked. Keanu leaned back in his chair, exhausted, but content. "Better than I expected," he said. a small smile on his face. "It's going to take time, but I think they're starting to believe in the vision." "That's all we can do," Sarah replied. "Take it one step at a time." As Keanu hung up the phone, he stared out the window at the city below. The skyline had never looked so full of promise. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time he felt ready for whatever came next. The road ahead would be long and full of challenges, but Keanu had learned something important. It wasn't the destination that mattered most. It was the journey and the lessons learned along the way, and with that he was ready for whatever lay ahead. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The company was slowly coming together again. Keanu had been at the helm of Nexus Tech for months now, and though the progress was steady, it had been anything but easy. The whispers of the past still lingered in the hallways, remnants of Jonathan's reign of deceit, and there were still skeptics within the company, employees who doubted that anything would truly change. They had seen the wreckage firsthand, and they were cautious, unwilling to trust easily. But Keanu had made it his mission to prove to them that change was possible. Every day he worked to demonstrate that he wasn't just another corporate figurehead looking to protect his own interests. No, he was committed to rebuilding Nexus Tech, from the inside out, brick by brick, relationship by relationship. However, as time went on, Keanu found himself facing not just the lingering remnants of Jonathan's corruption, but also a personal battle that he had been avoiding, his own unresolved feelings toward the whole ordeal. It was late one evening when it happened. Keanu was alone in his office, reviewing the latest round of financial reports when his phone rang. The name on the screen made his heart skip a beat. Alex. He hadn't heard from Alex in months. Their relationship had been strained since the fallout from the scandal. But now, as Keanu stared at the phone in his hand, he realized just how much he missed his old friend. Alex had been a constant in his life before everything had changed. Their bond had been broken over the course of the chaos, but here was an opportunity to repair what had been fractured. Keanu hesitated for a moment, but then he answered. "Keanu." Alex's voice came through the phone, sounding tired but familiar. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately." "I'm glad you called," Keanu said softly. "I was just thinking about you too." There was a brief pause before Alex spoke again. "You know, I never agreed with how you handled everything. I told you that before. But you've been through something that changed you, and maybe I didn't give you enough credit for that. I wanted to reach out and let you know that I've been following your work with Nexus Tech. I've seen the changes you're making. I just hope you're doing okay." Keanu could hear the concern in Alex's voice, and it hit him harder than he expected. He realized that in all the chaos and confusion, he had neglected the people who mattered most. Alex was one of those people. "I've been caught up in everything," Keanu admitted. "There were times when I didn't know if I was doing the right thing. It's been hard to balance everything. But I'm trying. I just want to make sure I'm doing it right." Alex's voice softened. "I know you, and I know you're trying. I'm not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. But I just want you to know that despite everything, I'm still here. And I hope you're not losing yourself in all of this." Keanu's throat tightened, the weight of his friend's words settling heavily on his chest. It was true. He had become so consumed by the fight for justice, so focused on rebuilding Nexus Tech, that he hadn't taken the time to truly reflect on who he was in the process. "Thanks, Alex," Keanu said, his voice thick with emotion. "I need to hear that. I've been trying so hard to do the right thing that I forgot what's important, the people who are still standing by me." The conversation continued, and for the first time in a long while, Keanu felt a sense of peace. He and Alex hadn't completely healed, but they were taking the first steps toward mending their friendship. For Keanu, that was a victory in itself. The next few weeks were crucial for both Keanu and Nexus Tech. With the company still in the process of healing, Keanu knew that the final test would come when the remnants of Jonathan's influence were completely eliminated. Keanu had done everything in his power to ensure that the company was heading in the right direction, but there was one last loose end to tie up, the issue of Jonathan himself. As Keanu prepared for the final battle, he found himself thinking, More about Jonathan, not just as a business rival, but as a reflection of the corruption that had pervaded the corporate world. Jonathan had been ruthless, calculating, and driven by ego. But now that he was behind bars, Keanu realized that his fight wasn't just about defeating Jonathan. It was about defeating the toxic mindset that had led to his rise in the first place. The final showdown came when Keanu was summoned to a courtroom for Jonathan's sentencing. It was a long-awaited day, one that had the potential to change everything. As Keanu sat in the courtroom, watching Jonathan stand before the judge, he couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. Jonathan's once powerful figure now seemed diminished, the man who had ruled with an iron fist now reduced to nothing more than a criminal facing the consequences of his actions. But as the judge read the charges, Keanu couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and sorrow. There was no joy in seeing Jonathan brought down. Rather, there was a deep understanding that this was the natural outcome of the path Jonathan had chosen. Keanu had come to terms with the fact that Jonathan was not his real enemy. It wasn't Jonathan's downfall that had defined Keanu's journey. It was what Keanu had done with the power and responsibility he had been given after the fall. The real battle had always been internal. It had been about figuring out who he was, what he stood for, and what he could offer the world moving forward. As the gavel struck, sealing Jonathan's fate, Keanu sat quietly. There were no cheers, no sense of triumph. The fight had been long, and it had cost him dearly, but now it was over. When the proceedings were finally over, Keanu walked out of the courthouse, a quiet resolve in his steps. The battle had been won, and with it the opportunity to rebuild not just a company but his life. Keanu stood on the steps, the cool breeze against his face, and for the first time in a long time, he took a deep breath. The future was uncertain, but for once he felt ready to face it. It wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about what came next, the next chapter, the next step in his life. And with that thought, Keanu walked into the unknown, ready for whatever challenges and triumphs awaited him. The final showdown had come to an end, but Keanu Reeves had won something far greater than any victory. He had won the chance to begin again. The days following Jonathan's sentencing felt like a strange new reality to Keanu. It was as if the air around him had shifted, lighter, less burdened, and yet still filled with the echoes of the past. The weight of the battle had been heavy, but with the final blow struck, a sense of peace had slowly settled in, the kind of peace that comes not from victory, but from acceptance, the kind that allowed him to breathe a little easier and to finally see the horizon clearly again. As the weeks turned into months, Keanu took the time to reconnect with what mattered most, his relationships, his values, and his vision for the future. While Nexus Tech was on the path to recovery, Keanu knew that his journey wasn't just about rebuilding a company. It was about rebuilding himself and finding the balance he had once lost in the chaos. One day, Keanu stood in front of his office window, looking out over the sprawling city below. The skyline had always symbolized ambition, power, and success. But now, for Keanu, it represented something different, a blank canvas, a place where he could leave his mark in a way that was meaningful, purposeful, and grounded in the lessons he had learned. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts, and Sarah entered with a smile. She had been by his side throughout the entire ordeal, and her unwavering support had been a beacon for him during the darkest times. Now she stood before him, her eyes full of pride. "Keanu," she said softly, walking toward him, "I know we've been through a lot, but look at how far you've come. I can't help but feel like this is just the beginning." Keanu smiled, his gaze still on the city below. "It's funny, Sarah," he said, his voice contemplative. "I used to think that success meant reaching the top of the ladder, climbing, higher and higher, winning at all costs. But now I realize that success isn't about reaching the top. It's about who you become along the way. And I've learned that the journey, the relationships, the challenges, the failures, is what truly matters." Sarah nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "You've come a long way, Keanu, not just as a businessman, but as a person. And now, You have the chance to create something that goes beyond just profits or power." Keanu turned to face her, his eyes filled with determination. "That's exactly it. I want to create something that matters. I want to make a difference, not just in the business world, but in people's lives." A sense of clarity washed over him. For the first time in a long time, Keanu knew exactly what he wanted to do. He had always been passionate about technology, but now his focus would be on using that technology to create positive change. He would build companies, initiatives and projects that weren't driven solely by the bottom line, but by the desire to make the world a better place. As he and Sarah sat down to discuss the future, Keanu knew that this was a new chapter in his life, a chapter that would redefine not just his career but his legacy. He was no longer just a man trying to outsmart the system or seeking revenge on those who had wronged him. He had transcended that need for retribution. Now he sought a different kind of victory, a victory that came from within, one that wasn't about beating someone else but about uplifting others. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in years Keanu felt ready for it. He wasn't burdened by the past anymore. He had learned from it, grown from it, and emerged stronger. And as he and Sarah discussed the future of Nexus Tech and beyond, he realized that the journey he had been on was not just a battle for survival, but a battle for meaning. In the days that followed, Keanu began to shift his focus from merely running a company to creating an environment where employees were treated with respect, where innovation could thrive and where personal growth was as important as professional success. He worked tirelessly to implement policies that prioritized mental health, diversity, and community engagement. He believed that success in business could coexist with kindness, integrity, and empathy. But it wasn't just about the workplace. Keanu knew that to truly make a difference, he had to look beyond the boardroom. He began to invest in local communities, supporting educational initiatives, technology access for underserved populations, and green initiatives. His name, once synonymous with a scandal that shook the corporate world, was now becoming associated with positive change. The ripple effect of Keanu's transformation spread far and wide as others began to take notice of his approach to leadership. He wasn't just a CEO anymore. He had become a symbol of what was possible when one person dared to take responsibility, to learn from their mistakes, and to use their power for good. A year after the final resolution of the Nexus Tech scandal, Keanu found himself at the opening of a new community center, one of the many initiatives he had helped fund and create. The center was designed to provide resources, mentorship, and access to technology for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. It was a moment of quiet pride for Keanu, standing among the people he hoped to inspire. As he spoke to the gathered crowd, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. "This center is more than just a building," he said, his voice steady. "It's a place where we can all come together and create opportunities for one another. It's a reminder that success isn't just about what we achieve for ourselves, it's about what we can give back." The crowd applauded, and Keanu took a moment to reflect. He had come a long way since that fateful day when Jonathan's betrayal had turned his world upside down. The man who had once been driven by vengeance and ambition had now become a force for good in the world. As he looked out at the smiling faces in front of him, Keanu realized that he had finally found his true purpose. The past had shaped him, but it no longer defined him. The future, full of possibility, was his to create. And in that moment, Keanu Reeves understood the most important lesson of all, that the true measure of success is not how high you rise, but how many people you lift along the way. With that, Keanu smiled, ready for whatever the future had in store. The journey was far from over, but the man he had become was more than prepared to face it.